What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the next part of our blogging app series. In this video, we're going to specifically take a look at showing our paywall intelligently when the user tries to tap into articles. So drop a like down below, jump into your Xcode project, and let's get back to it. So essentially what we want to do is every time the user taps on an article to view that's not their own article, we want to keep track of, the fact that they viewed an article or a blog post. And based on the number of times that they've actually viewed a post, we can set a date after, X number of views that the current time needs to be for them to view another article. So in other words, after they viewed, let's say 2 or 3 articles, we're going to say, okay, you can't view anything else until 24 hours has passed, which, might be a little aggressive, but you get the point. We're going to pick some criteria and hold the user to it. So let's go ahead and let me just run the project in a simulator, make sure we're still looking good. And we're going to be writing out the majority of the code in this video in the in-app purchase manager. So I'm going to pop into here as well. So just as a quick refresher, inside of here, we have a lot of the purchases SDK calls, which is basically revenue cat. That's how we are, checking the user's subscription state, subscribing, restoring purchases, etc., etc. So what we want to actually do in here, and I'm going to do it in an extension just for the sake of cleanliness of our code, we want to have methods to track article views. So we're going to say track post views or article views, call it whatever you want. And let's go ahead and write some functions that are going to help us do this. So the first thing that we want to add a function for is, can view another post. So let's actually make it a computed property. So we're going to say var can view post, which is going to return a bool. And just to start off, we're going to go ahead and return true here. And then we're going to actually sprinkle in the logic, which is going to let us know, more intelligently based on some date option or some date property if we can view a post. Now, speaking of that date option, we're going to go ahead and stick that in here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say private var. Next article, or let's actually call it article or post. So if you call article, call article everywhere. I'm calling it post because that's what I've called it elsewhere. Try to keep it consistent. So we're going to say post eligible view date, and this is going to be a date optional. So by default, it's going to be nil. And essentially what we are going to do in here is we are going to say guard let date equals date. And if we have that date, we're going to check if the current date is greater than, whatever the next eligible date is. So stick with me. This will make sense momentarily. So we're going to say return if the current date is greater than or equal to date. And in this case, if it's nil, we're going to say return true. We can always view a post if that property is nil. So the next thing that we want in here is a function which is going to log the number of articles that we viewed and handle setting that date. So we're going to say public func log post viewed. And we're going to call this every single time, we view a post intelligently from the post view controller. Or post view controller, I should say. So how are we actually going to log the number of times we viewed a post? Well, we're going to use user defaults. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say if var count is going to be from user defaults standard, and we want to go ahead and get a integer for the key of post views. If we have that, what we are going to do is we are going to set count plus 1. So we're going to say set count plus 1 for the key, and this is going to be the same key, of course, so we're going to put that there. And in this case, if we don't have that count, we can go ahead and simply log the number 1 here. So let me go ahead and change count plus 1 just to 1, and this can turn into a if let instead of a if var. So that's looking pretty good. The next thing that we actually want to go ahead and do is assign to our date here if we have hit, whatever our threshold number of views are. So let's go ahead and work on that as well. So let's see how we want to do this. So we're going to go ahead and say total by default is going to be 1. And inside of this if let, if we come inside of here, in other words, we have a previous set count, we're going to say total is count plus 1. And down here, I'm going to say if total is 3, we're going to go ahead and say that we've hit the limit. So whatever we called our date variable here, we're going to assign to this the current date, and we're going to add basically 24 hours to this. Now we need to get seconds that map up to 24 hours, so we're going to say 24, or maybe we can just say hour is going to be time interval, and we have 60 seconds in a minute times 60 minutes, which gives us an hour. So this hour is going to be hour times 24. So we're essentially saying the next time that we're eligible to actually view a post is the current time, so now, plus 24 hours. And the next thing you might be wondering is, well, what happens if the user tries to view something again? So we shouldn't actually be logging this unless, we get to the point where we can view an article. And the other thing that I'll mention here is when we go ahead and call this function for can view a post, we are going to reset the count. The reason we're going to reset the count is because otherwise we're never going to come back to, count equaling 3. If you didn't want to do it this way, the other way you could do it is use a modulo operator and say equals 0. And what this is going to say is, if we have a multiple of 3, then, we can go ahead and say that the user can't view. Modulo operators can get a little tricky and a little messy, so what I'm going to opt to do is simply update this to be 0, just like that, for the post views key. So let's go ahead and actually use this in our view controller. Let's see what's going on here. We're saying if let count. So it looks like this conditional binding. So I believe if let isn't needed here because what this is going to return to us is 0. So we can simply say there is our total, and let me actually assign it to this. That probably makes a whole lot more sense. So we can go ahead and say let total. Now we don't even need any of this if else nonsense anymore since we can just add to it. Essentially, this is going to give us 0 back if it is 0. In other words, we have nothing assigned to it. So here we are going to say this is total plus 1, just like that, and this check will remain the same. So where are we actually going to call this functionality from? We're going to call it from a few places. The first place that we want to go ahead and call it is in post, or I believe we call it a view post view controller. So inside of here, we want to log that the user has actually gone to view this post if this post doesn't belong to the current user. So how do we figure out if the post doesn't belong to the current user? Now we could pass into that view controller if it is the current user's post. So let's see how we want to do that. So inside of here, I'm going to say in the initializer is owned by current user is going to be a Boolean, and by default it's going to be false here. And what we're going to do is hang on to this property internally to this view controller. So here we're going to say private let, and this is going to be a Boolean just like that. And now if you jump into the profile view controller, you can see that we create this here. And what we want to do is we want to pass in this property, this parameter, based on if the current user email address, let's see, I think we called it current email address, is equal to the email address that we have cached. So we're going to go ahead and compute this up above. So let me go ahead and do that here. We're going to say this by default is false, and we're going to say if let email, which will be user default standard, and we want to get a string for the key of email, and we're going to say that is owned by current user is going to be email, and if that equals the current email, and this current email is for the current profile that the user is viewing. So essentially, we're going to pass this into this view controller from the profile. Now, once we're in here, what we want to go ahead and do on the IAP manager is we want to go ahead and log that a post was viewed once we click in here, but we only want to do that if this is not owned, this post we're viewing is not owned by the current user. So we're going to say IAP manager shared, and we're gonna log post viewed, just like that. And that's how we're going to keep track of, if we have or have not viewed a post. Now, I recognize that we're not checking from the feed if, this post belongs to the current user. Now, I'm going to purposely exclude that so we can test it from the feed, but you can extend this functionality and passing in this is owned by current user to the HomeViewController as well. So cool, looking pretty good. The next thing that we actually want to go ahead and do, we're going to do it back in the ProfileViewController. That's not how you spell profile. Let's try that one more time. Is before we actually push on this view controller to view the post, we want to check if we're even allowed to view a post, because we could be viewing somebody else's profile, in theory. So let's see how we want to actually do that here. So what we are going to say is if is owned by current user is false. In other words, this is trying to view somebody else's post. And IP manager, so let's go ahead and actually put this here with curlies. We can only view, in this case, I'm going to put this in the else block as well. So if we own the post, we can view it because it's our post. And, if we don't own the post, the other thing that we want to go ahead and check in here is if IP manager shared, and there is a computer property we added, which is can view a post. In that case, we're going to view it. And otherwise, this is where our subscriptions come into play. We are going to show an upsell. Now, what did we actually do to show the upsell? I believe we called it a, paywall view controller. So we're going to go ahead and instantiate it, and we're going to present it. So we're going to say present VC animated true. So I believe this is all that we need to do. So what's going to happen now is every time we view a post, we're going to log that a post occurred, a view occurred, a post view. And after we try to keep clicking on into different posts, we should essentially almost guaranteed see this after 3 taps. Now keep in mind that we're currently logged into the single account that we have, so it's not going to work exactly from this profile view controller. So what we are going to do is I'm going to jump into the home view controller, and wherever we're actually pushing on that controller, which is in this did select row, we want to do the same thing here. So we are going to say guard IP manager shared can view post, and if we're not able to view the post, we're going to once again do the same thing, which is show the paywall view controller. So we're going to go ahead, instantiate it, and say go ahead and present it with an animation completion nil. So let's go ahead and give it a run, and let's make sure this is working. Now, one other thing that I recognize that we haven't accounted for is that date property that we added to the IAP manager. There's a pretty easy way to circumvent it. So because that date isn't being cached, essentially the user can cheat the system a little bit and just close the app and relaunch it. Now, we should probably be caching this to avoid that, but let's see if this is working, and we can always extend as needed. So I'm going to tap into this post. We just viewed the post once. We're going to tap into this. We just viewed it twice. We'll tap into this. We viewed it a 3rd time, and now we should see the paywall. So it looks like I'm not quite seeing the paywall. I'm seeing it after we have tapped into it for the 4th time. So the reason we're probably seeing it after the 4th time is because by default it's 0, and the order of operations that we're doing here are not correct. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce this to 2. So let's go ahead and give our app a run, a close and a run, and you'll see that we'll be able to circumvent that date. Since by default at app launch it's going to be 2. So once again, we can tap into it. So I'm going to run the app again from Xcode since we have actually gone ahead and set that number to 2. And let's make sure that we limit it now to viewing the post 3 times since things are enumerated by 0. So 0, 1, 2. So 1, 2, see it a 3rd time, and boom, it should block us now. There we are. There is our paywall telling us to subscribe. Otherwise, we got to wait 24 hours. So that's basically how this is going to work. So let's take this a step further, and let me double check that if I tap into my own post, I can still view it, which, makes sense because why would I pay to view my own post? And let's take a look here as well. Still looking pretty good. Now, taking it another step forward, we want to allow the user to make a purchase and actually view the post. So we already have the functionality to make the purchase. Now let's go ahead and take a look in our paywall view controller what we had set up for the paywall. So we have a did tap buy button or a did tap subscribe. Let's see what I called it here. Did tap subscribe. And once we call this, subscribe function in the callback, we say we have purchased. In the success case, we dismiss the controller. But the other thing that we want to go ahead and do, and let's see if we do it in here, is we want to verify that the user, or we're caching something that's letting the app know that the user is now, premium. So I think we're doing this already. We're already saying user defaults set true for premium, just like that. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we need to be checking in the IAP manager, in the function we added here, if the user is premium. So I'm going to go ahead and say guard is premium, otherwise. So actually, instead of saying even guard, we can say if is premium, go ahead and return true. So regardless if the date is set, if the user is a premium user, we don't even need to compute the date or if it's set or any of this nonsense, since they've paid us, so we're going to allow them to view the article. So let's see if this actually works. I'm going to go ahead and give it a run. Make sure that you have your StoreKit configuration file set up in here so we can test the in-app purchases. I think we should have it set since we did it a couple of videos ago. And the other thing I'll mention is I've got RevenueCat opened up here in our dashboard, which has all of our data, our configuration for our app. It was Thoughts iOS. So I'm going to click into our app here. Let me actually click on the dashboard here. We'll just click on the RevenueCat logo. And let's see, we should have our app. I'm going to go ahead and tap into these a total of 3 times. And on the 4th attempt, it should yell at me to subscribe. So there is our paywall. We're going to go ahead and expand our console here so we can start getting some of our logs. I'm going to hit purchase. Now we should see a share sheet. Now if we don't see a share sheet, chances are that you're not subscribed or signed into your Apple ID, but there is our share sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and hit purchase. It's going to do its thing. It's going to say we succeeded, and it should dismiss with successful logs. And when I tap on into this now, boom, we can tap into the post and read as many as we can. You'll see that I continue to tap inwards and it doesn't complain. And the other cool thing that I'll show you guys here is in the dashboard in RevenueCat, you can go ahead and refresh the page. Now we see here we have 0 subscribers and no revenue, like we're not doing pretty hot. So how do we actually see our sandbox data? There's a switch up here at the top right that says View Sandbox Data. If you go ahead and tap on it, you'll start to see some numbers populate here. And these are the numbers of our test users. So you can see we have 4 active subscriptions. We have a number of installs, and down here you can actually see the subscriptions with the bundle ID. So here is the one that we just subscribed. It says it happened a few seconds ago. Here is the product that was subscribed to, which is the product identifier. And here is the user. So we can tap into this and see some more, information, some activity. There's the timestamp, etc., etc. So it's important to make sure that your integration is working as expected with RevenueCat, and RevenueCat makes it pretty darn easy to just hit the switch and see your test data here. Definitely verify this before you ship anything to production to make sure your in-app purchases are working. So let's go ahead and give this a run one more time. And we want to verify that our subscription state does persist. In other words, if I tap into this a total of 3 times, we shouldn't see a paywall now on the 4th because we should be premium. And that's in fact what we are seeing here. The user is premium. I believe we're fetching the premium status on app launch. Let me go ahead and verify that by going into the app delegates. We call the function here to, get subscription status right there. And essentially we cache what the user's status is. And that's how we're going to basically handle the paywall. And that's the paywall in a nutshell. Now, three article views or 3 post views is a little aggressive. And again, we're not caching the date here. We're holding it in memory in the app session. So the easiest way for the user to get around the paywall is by closing and relaunching the app. You can go ahead and cache this value in user defaults, the date. You can alternatively, leave it this way, and the user might just get annoyed enough where they'll, opt to subscribe to your service to read unlimited articles. But I digress. You can tweak the service as you see fit for your use case. So we've come pretty far. We've got the profile working. We've got, articles being viewed. The other thing that we could go ahead and do is add a little share button here to share articles. Now you can design and tweak this, however you'd like. I'm not going to spend too much time on that since it's very subjective and we're going to keep this series brief, but that is all I've got for this video for you guys. Leave a like down below if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the channel if you're into iOS and Swift. Let me know in the comments if you hit any issues, especially with the in-app purchase part. It can get a little tricky, but RevenueCat does make it super simple for you to integrate. So either way, let me know. Happy to help. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.